So week one, we saw how we can use AudioPen to simply think out loud and then have this AI tool create something more clear, more concise, and better organized. Week two, we saw how we can interact with and create assistants on OpenAI in particular. This week, we are looking at how we can connect the two with automation. This is the flow that I shared in the video. And what it does is it takes the output of AudioPen, which is already a nicely polished version of my observations during a classroom observation, and it sends that to ChatGPT, where it is going to be formatted in such a way that it is a nicely polished piece of feedback that is aligned with best practices and also with my school's own philosophy when it comes to teaching and learning. Then it will send an email in my inbox that is a draft that I can review and then send to the teacher for feedback. And finally, it will create a file in my Google Drive to create a portfolio of all of my observations. So what we want to do now is look in detail, step by step, how you can recreate this flow for your own purposes. So you would go to Activepieces, create an account. If you don't have one, then go to New Flow, and then to from scratch. The first thing that we need is a trigger. Whenever that thing happens, it triggers the flow. The kind of trigger that we need is called a webhook. So I look for webhook. I select cat, and as you can see, it gives me a URL. In AudioPen, if I go to settings, I scroll down to integrations, and there you can see I can manually trigger, or those are for webhooks that are manually triggered. That is the one that I want. So I would go to add webhook, give it a name, and then copy and paste the URL. So this is my trigger. So to test this, I need to record a note. So I'm going to do a very quick one. Hi, I'm demonstrating how to create an automatic workflow on Activepieces to provide feedback to teachers. So AudioPen is rewriting a little bit more nice and concise what I just said. And as you can see, every time I will have now this webhook here. So I just have to click here, go to number 3 and say trigger. Right? That allows me to test the step. And once I test the step, it tells me it's been successful. So I can move on and go to step 2. Step 2 in my flow is talking to ChatGPT. So I'm going to look for OpenAI. The OpenAI, I could talk to an assistant, but I'm going to choose ChatGPT just in case you have not created your own assistant. So I'm going to go to Ask GPT, and it asks for a connection. I have some already set up, but I'm going to create a new one to show you how to do it. So you go to New Connection. I'm going to call it OpenAI Activepieces. This can be any name you want because it's just for you, really. And as you can see, give me a link to go and create an API key. So if you don't have an account, it will prompt you to create an account here. I'm going to create a new key just for this demo, and then I will deactivate it. So I'm going to call it Activepieces, create that secret key, then copy it, and then paste it here. I next need to choose the model. I'm going to choose 3.5 Turbo, which is a good one. If you want a little bit more pricey, but better, is ChatGPT-4. You could use ChatGPT-4 Turbo. I'm going to choose actually GPT-4 Turbo. It's less expensive than GPT-4. It's still highly performant. The question is the message that I sent to ChatGPT. And here I want to combine two things. I want the message to include the recording from AudioPen, but also a prompt that tells ChatGPT what to do with this message. So you will find in the newsletter a prompt that I have written for you. So we have our prompt copied and pasted, and what this prompt does is it tells ChatGPT what to do with the AudioPen message which is to turn it into a piece of feedback that follows best practices and that is aligned with my school's philosophy of teaching and learning. So as you can see, you have a placeholder here for your observation notes. So you would simply go to catch request, insert, and go to body, and then select body, which is the transcribed message from AudioPen. Make sure you only have one. It should look like this: catch, request, body, body. And then I have something called the ISP way. It would look different for your school, right? So you might want to say here, my school's philosophy of teaching and learning. And then, as you can see, my prompt is fairly long here. I would change to teaching and learning philosophy. And you can simply copy and paste whatever you have. We have a document called the ASP way, which is fairly detailed, but you can have a more concise statement of what that teaching and learning philosophy is. So, for instance, we align instruction with universal design for learning. So again, I'm going to test that step. It might take a second because it needs to build that connection the first time. And as you can see, that is the feedback that is created by ChatGPT. Finally, I'm going to add one or two more steps, depending on what you're looking for. One would be to add Gmail. I'm going to want to send an email connection. I'm going to select, so I'm going to give the name. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to choose my personal email. I can decide who I send that email to. So I'm going to send it also to my personal email. I can choose the subject. I'm going to say draft observation feedback. And then body, I need to choose, well, what is going to be in that email. So I go to ask ChatGPT here, and I just choose results because I want the body of the email to be the output of ChatGPT. I could add a CC if I wanted, even a BCC. I could decide who is the reply to, and more options that I'm not going to go over here. So I'm going to test that step. It's done already. And I can then add as many steps as I want. So we said, for instance, to replicate that flow that I had here, one thing that I want to do is to connect to my Google Drive, create a new file. So it would be something here, right? You would create a connection to your Google Drive, which is one that I already have. The file name, let's say that I want to use whatever it is. Let's say the ID number. I could give the date if I want to be able to find them easily. The text, I want again this result from ChatGPT. And I have created a folder you could create one in your Google Drive that is called Observation Notes. Again, I'm going to test that step. And that is done. So now that I'm happy with it, I can go ahead and publish this flow. And now we can test it. So let's go to AudioPen, give a piece of feedback. I'm going to imagine that I just visited a class. I just came back from visiting a math class. It was very well organized and planned. Students were working in small groups They were self-selected, working along a playlist that was aligned with the rubric for their summative assessments. There were high levels of collaboration and quite a bit of excitement among the students that allowed the teachers to circulate and check understanding, provide feedback as needed. One question, one wondering that I might have was about two students who seem to not be as engaged, and I'm fairly certain that they are students who are ELA students. So I'm wondering if language might have been a barrier there and how that could be addressed moving forward. So that was my just thinking out loud note from what I just observed. The AI on AudioPen is going to transcribe that into something, again, more concise, more clear, better polished. I'm going to activate my webhook. And that is all I need to do, right? Now the flow is going to happen automatically. That note is being sent to ChatGPT. It is going to be turned into a nicely polished piece of feedback, and I'm going to receive the draft in my email, as well as it's going to be documented on my Google Drive. So let's test that hypothesis. As you can see, I already have the feedback, and here's what it said. Dear teacher, I hope this message finds you well. I had the pleasure of observing your math class today and was impressed by the structured yet dynamic learning environment, etc., etc. You can see that it does include the learning philosophy from our school, right? It says this method not only engaged students, but also enabled effective peer collaboration, aligning beautifully with our UDL approach. You can also see that it does develop a little bit on my concern at the end. And the reason is the way the prompt is designed is to be very warm, positive, encouraging, but also to always develop a little bit on what is next. How can we engage in continuous professional growth and keep improving in our practices? So I would go over this draft. If I'm happy with it, just forward it to my teacher, edit if needed, and I would have this documented in my drive for future reference, like a portfolio of observations that builds up over time. So I hope you found this video useful and you'll be able to create, or not only to replicate this flow, but also to create your own automations to help you be more effective, save you time, and therefore focus on other tasks that might be more important, such as actually being in the classroom, observing and thinking how we can best support our teachers.